Welcome to the 2025 version of our Global Advisory Trends Report or webinar. We must come up with a new name next time, Richard. It's quite a mouthful.
Bit of a mouthful,
Uh,
yeah.
this is the third iteration of the report that we have done, and it is something that we really aim to. Spotlight is very much about partnering with our clients and providing best of breed information to our clients, not just in terms of the software that we offer, but in the partnership alongside the best accounting firms globally. And I think some of the insights in this report put us in really good stead to do that. A few new questions in the 2025 year is a real sign of the times that we're operating in, with some more juice around AI and ESG coming. And we've also had some additional partners in this iteration of the survey as well. So we have partnered with Karbon, Ignition, and the Outsourced Office, or TOA Global, as they are also called. It's very much a global survey that we undertake, where we have had responses from over 700 odd accounting firms, over 850 responses, spanning the globe in 8 different countries, largely spanning New Zealand, Australia, the US, the UK, South Africa, parts of Asia, and a few other smaller regions as well. So I'm really excited to dig in to the results of this survey. As I said, we're very fortunate today to have Ian and Richard join the call. So obviously Richard Francis really needs no introduction. He is the founder and CEO of Spotlight Reporting. And we have Ian Vacin, founder and CEO of Karbon as well, coming live to us. And my name is Danelle Whaanga. For those of you who don't know me, I am previously the Chief Customer Officer at Spotlight, now looking after our partnerships and a number of other various projects. I also do spend a part of my time back in an accounting practice as well. So doing a bit of the dual purpose role. Ian and Richard, thank you for joining us on the call today.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Danelle. Danelle's the only Spotlight reporting staff member who's actually gone back to the accounting profession, having come over the fence. So we scared you back, didn't we?
When I say that I was passionate about the industry, I wasn't lying. Very much walking
Yeah.
Rich.
Juggling two jobs. Wonderful to have Ian on the call. Obviously, Karbon, a really good partner of ours, strategic partner, integration partner coming down the pipe. And Ian has worked in with us for many, many years across with a few different hats on, but obviously as a founder of Karbon, we've been watching the Karbon story with great interest and doing great things in practice management.
Thanks for having me, Richard. I'm super excited. As you all know, I'm a big fan of data, a big fan of research, and a big fan of understanding kind of where everything's trending. So I really appreciate you guys putting together the report and all the different facts and findings that we're going to go through today.
Am I going to get a signed copy of your book?
When it's actually
Yeah,
published.
I know. There's a survey or something to fill out, but no, I like that. I'm actually rewriting our Transform Advisory playbook at the moment. But anyway, we're not here to pimp books, are we, Danelle? We better keep moving.
Without further ado, I will try and keep you progressing through the topics that we're going to cover as best I can. So the key themes in the survey, we do talk to firms about the services that they offer. We'll touch on revenue and certainly around some fee growth insights. And our friends and partners over at Ignition have got some really useful surveys around some pricing updates in both the APAC and the US regions, if anyone would like to check those out. We'll be looking at what makes really a firm of the future and digging in a little bit to ESG, AI, which I know Ian is particularly passionate about, and we have certainly collaborated with Karbon and taken a lot of insight from their AI and the accounting industry report and practice excellence reports as well, which are both very good reads, and I'll let Ian talk to later. A little bit around outsourcing, and then really looking at what are the challenges that firms are facing. And there has certainly been some movement in that in 2025 for a number of reasons, geoeconomic and political, no less. And what's next for the future of the industry? Where are we going? What are firms looking to really overcome and put some considered time and energy and effort into moving forward? So first and foremost, looking at the mixture of firms, I think it's fair to say, when we first delved into the realm of cloud accounting and what that would mean, and that the cloud was going to take accountants' job, I think that that myth has been well and truly disestablished, but having firms that have embraced the technology, the cloud, and actually moved to more of a hybrid model is certainly starting to see those early adopter advantages faster and stronger than those that perhaps came over a little bit kicking and screaming and saying, well, compliance isn't dead, which nobody was offering or really subscribing to. But the fact that actually we did need to move with the times, and we needed to be far more proactive for our clients. And so seeing that we've got now a far higher mix of hybrid firms offering both advisory and compliance services, I think should give firms a lot of comfort. There is, interestingly, still a very small proportion that are unidentified of themselves. They don't know if they are
Yeah.
hybrid or
Slightly confused.
advisory or compliance focused. But those progressive firms really starting to lead the way and take charge. Richard, is this something that sort of rings true with what you're seeing talking to other firms?
It's really interesting, and I'll jump over to you, Ian, in a minute because I want to hear what you're seeing, particularly in North America. This was really kind of why we founded Spotlight. I was doing progressive advisory work in a big firm, and then ran my own practice where we were 80% advisory, 20% compliance, doing value-added work that really changed lives and kind of made clients want to actually pay more because there was that value associated with it. And when I founded Spotlight, I thought we would drag alongside Xero and Karbon and Intuit and all these other kind of software houses, accounting firms towards that. And it's been slower than perhaps I assumed in my naivety. Whilst it's really encouraging to see there being more hybrid and progressive firms in each and every one of these surveys we do, it is generally moving slower. And regionally, we've seen APAC lead the way for a number of reasons. I think in general, the ecosystem of QuickBooks and Xero and others have kind of probably flowered a little bit more in APAC than elsewhere. But we're really excited by North America, and Spotlight's investing more there, and EMEA, UK, where we're starting to see the firms catch up there and want to do other things, and AI is partly an enabler of that. But I think they're seeing a lot of the early adopter firms flourish. So that's my read. It's I do as you do, Ian, kind of customer roundtables, and I think sometimes the level of advisory revenue is still relatively low in some of those hybrid firms, but they're definitely engaging with and trying to leverage that and have those deeper, more meaningful relationships with customers. But I'd love to hear Ian's take on this.
Yeah, so I went back and I looked at some of our stats and figures from the reports and whatnot that we've done over the last 12 months. And we look at it a little bit differently, just looking at what services they might offer. And right now, advisory sits just underneath 79% of firms actually doing it. That doesn't go
Hmm.
to what this graphic is really talking about, which is the level of the revenue generation within that. Now, when I look back, as we had come out of COVID, the advisory was roughly towards the high 60 percentile. So
Mm.
we've got ourselves a situation of growth. And when you look at where it gets self-selected between if I'm doing bookkeeping and accounting, which is again what the largest category, those sit up at 89 and 87% respectively.
Yeah.
So while this graphic shows that the unsure, we want to make you sure. But when you look at the traditional firm, there is a gravitation that we are seeing that's pulling that forward. A lot of it has to do with profitability. In North America, when we're talking to folks, there is for those that haven't really gone very far down the path, a knowledge that they should,
Mm.
but an understanding that they don't necessarily have all the tools that they need to do that in terms of their knowledge and so forth. With a lot of the consolidation that we've been seeing, especially in North America, it is about driving through compliance to do the advisory. And
Mm.
that's what we hear in roundtable after roundtable. So, when we really looked at the practice management space back 10 years ago, it was a slow roll. And again, advisory being something, Richard, you started before that. I feel like this 2020 second half of the decade is going to be one of that number of adoption is going to rise, and the revenue that's
Yeah.
generated will also rise as AI pressures might influence the other service lines to be less profitable in time.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it, to see and hear, and you're kind of on the road more than almost any of us, but at Evolve and AICPA Engage, etc. Although there's still a lot of, dare I say it, relatively dry content streams around estate tax and other things that made me pivot to advisory really early in my accounting career. It's really interesting to see CAS and the demand for CAS speakers and people who have been there, done that, starting to emerge in North America. So I think even though it's a little bit shallow, and you're right, there's a lot of consolidation, a lot of M&A going on for firms to kind of hoover up other progressive firms and try and get that profit line moving. I do feel like it's a positive trajectory, uh, and all software companies would like it to be a bit faster, but at least it's trending in the right direction now, and we're seeing play out what we saw play out in APAC probably 5, 10 years ago.
Well, I think the other thing that let's all be cognizant of where we are in this particular time period. There's a lot of uncertainty in market. So the small businesses that
Absolutely.
we're advising, even medium-sized business, just don't know what is going to happen in times of uncertainty. That does often stifle sort of consumer behavior, but it
Yeah.
requires more insight and foresight on what to do within that. And so the client demands are also increasing within that sort of scope. And so I think there's multiple competitive and market pressures that are driving the reason for these numbers moving. It's not just, folks like us on a webinar talking about the fact that advisory is the future. It's not,
Yeah.
it's here, already here, but it's a question of, and I think we'll see it in a later slide, the breadth and depth of advisory, what all the different types of advisory has grown, tremendously over the last 5 years.
Mhm.
And that differentiation is because of that client demand.
Well, we live in interesting times, and I think interesting times are the tremendous kind of inflection point for accounting firms that want to pivot or innovate. And some sit there nervously on the sidelines, worrying about the geopolitical and economic headwinds that we do have, whilst others kind of thrive in that degree of chaos. So we're also seeing some of those people who love being innovators come to the fore.
I think to your point, Ian, 100% client led. Absolutely. Those traditional firms who didn't necessarily want to come across are being forced to by clients, but also, that generational shift that accounting firms are having with their teams coming through, no one really wanting to sit on the compliance work for a 40-plus year career. And those teams are happy to embrace technology, and they're actually wanting to get out of bed to have conversations. And whatever the stream may be, as you say, there's a whole lot of different types of advisory streams that are coming to the fore now. And people within firms are actually wanting to drive it, embrace it, and they may have a Richard Francis or an Vacin sitting amongst their firm, wanting to do something a little bit differently and innovate, and being given the mandate to do so. Absolutely.
That generational shift is a really interesting. I mean, we could talk about that for a long time, but seeing customers demand a different experience as well as accountants coming into the profession, and we know that there's lots of people, David Leary and Blake Oliver, etc., talking about this kind of generational shift in accounting flows from university, etc. People don't want to wait, as you said, Danelle, 40 years for the partner to die, just to buy your way into a compliance partnership, which is kind of when I started, that was the case, and one reason why I jumped out and did my own thing. So, um, yeah, interesting to see the revenue shift again, relatively slow, but still heading in the right direction, and a
And
lot of firms stuck in that 10 to 50% range.
absolutely. And I think what we're seeing, and we are seeing more firms identify as hybrid, 50/50 revenue, 50/50 compliance advisory. The amount of revenue that has been generated still sitting a lot under that 10 to 30%. So that's where they've got usually the half dozen, the dozen top clients that they were doing things for previously. But very much the focus, if we're looking forward to the next 12 months and where the revenue streams are coming on, firms definitely looking to scale. So that's looking more at those perhaps B clients who have never necessarily asked for things before, or clients that are perhaps in that small to medium-sized space that, to your point, Ian, they need insights and foresight because they have got some tough times coming up, or they're wanting to do things there is a real double-edged sword in the industry. Those who are struggling, as it's been a very long rainy day, and those who are who have perhaps slightly stronger balance sheets, and they're looking to actually take the most of opportunities, perhaps invest while the opportunities are available and they are, priced well and they can be financed well. And so therefore working with a lot more clients, I think is the key in terms of value pricing, or pricing right to get those revenue streams increased when firms actually want to see that realized in the next 12 months.
I find this set of graphs fascinating. And there's a couple of key points in the report. And this one for me is when you see a shift this much between what you do and where you want to be. I mean, a normal curve is kind of what you're seeing here on the left, and you see it shift by an entire bucket, if not more, across that. And that goes to the earlier comment around, I know where I want to be, but I need to be able to get there. And I'm feeling the pressure and I just need to make it happen. And what we've seen a lot of times with the practice excellence report that we've been doing is there is this point by which if you take action, it is much easier to continue that motion once that happens. That's what we've seen in that data. There's this sort of weird drop in the middle that occurs. And we're seeing it here as well. If you make that shift and you've adopted those particular things, you've trained your team, you've put those mechanisms in place, you're going to see yourself be able to shift that revenue. The other thing that was surprising to me here is you look at 5% at the very end on the far hand right of both graphs, which stays stable, which makes sense. That is pure CFO advisory companies making, doing that holistically, which, that number has grown over the course of the last decade. And again, I'd love to learn more about those companies because again, they're living where a lot of people want to be. And so you have this sort of situation of we know what we need to do, we need to make it happen, we need to start making sure our teams are enabled in getting that done.
It's really interesting because it's a demand versus supply argument to a certain extent. And we talked earlier about, a lot of innovation being driven by clients and generational change, which is right to a certain extent, but it means the accounting firms are quite reactive to those clients. And if you're in a medium-sized or large accounting practice, sometimes they can be the squeaky half dozen, for example. And one thing we see, Ian, which is possibly a little bit different to Karbon, where of course you have the entire practice within the machine, so to speak. Spotlight often has the group or the 5 or the 10 clients that are deemed worthy of advisory by that accounting firm, which is incredibly frustrating for us because we can see the 1,000 clients in Karbon. And we can see that only, say, 6 or 10 or 20, whatever it happens to be, are getting reports and forecasts and mentoring sessions and all of those things. And just some of the roundtables I've been doing recently, some of the findings, I suppose, from that is the accounting firms are still moving really slowly around intent. So deciding what model they want to be. And getting buy-in from the partners on that, having a strategy around advisory, choosing the services they want to offer, having targets, actually measuring their own fees from advisory versus compliance and the different service offerings. Sometimes accounting firms they just have a bucket called fees in their own accounts. So it's kind of like the builder who never finishes his own house. Accountants aren't actually necessarily monitoring their own numbers and their own KPIs, and then bringing the team on the journey because there is education, hiring practices, and everything that kind of rolls into this. And I learned that the hard way when I set up the advisory division at a large firm that actually a lot of the staff around me weren't suited for advisory. We hadn't hired the right people or trained them in the right way. So I think there's some maturing of the mindset and the strategic intent of accounting practices still to be done, and it's a slow burn, which is why a lot of practices are stuck in the 10 to 30% bucket now, even though they aspire to that 31 to 50, 51 to 70 range.
Yeah, a lot of it comes back.
Sorry, you go.
Nope, you go.
We've seen this in previous years too. the future is always that bit brighter. And tomorrow or next week or next month will be a little bit more prosperous. I think what's really interesting that comes through in this report is it's really reliant on firms having that strategy, as you talk about, Richard, and then taking action, because most firms are not looking to actually onboard new clients. So previously we've heard, well, our clients aren't right for it, or our clients don't need advisory. They're not prepared to pay for it. Because of the times we're in, people are needing our services more than ever. And it's really up to the firm to speak to their existing client base and then price those services accordingly if they want to see these revenue shifts. Otherwise, they'll be sitting here in 12 months' time, still with that revenue at about 10 to 30% and actually not securing that 30 to,
Well,
50% revenue.
Danelle, we'll jump to Ian, but I've got 3 words for those accounting firms who say that their clients aren't ready. Ask better questions.
I'll
Ian.
play a contrarian argument there. So because we're measuring constantly what's happening in the profession across the globe. What's happened in 2025 has been a bit unprecedented. Going into the back of 2024, we saw the amount of investment and competencies of firms tailing down as a tailwind of COVID, where there wasn't a necessity to really invest in the team. Part of that has to do with the outcomes of the Great Resignation. It also was the fact of there was a lot of M&A and trying to, maybe bolster, what am I going to do? But in 2025, from the beginning of the year, we've seen a 10% jump, which we have not seen in any of the measurements that we've had across all the different sort of vehicles that show people investing in their team and investing in the mechanisms by which to make the firm more effective, of which the highest was off the charts was in their growth vehicles, in their sales and marketing. And that is, I think, a direct relationship for the sort of economic uncertainty that's happening around the globe. And so, yes, there's a comment there, Richard, around you're not asking good questions, but now you're being in a situation where all of your peers are now investing in trying to do more with less, or get more revenue from the existing clients that we have, or we're trying to approach new clients because we're seeing possibly some revenue streams maybe not being where we thought they would be. And in those types of things, you have to lean in. And many firms are leaning in on the strategy side of things, and they're leaning on the growth vehicles. So I just want folks to keep that in mind where, yes, you might have the aspiration and the inspiration to be able to move to this, but if you don't actually put the effort in right now, your peers actually are. We can see that in the data itself. And a lot of it comes back to, if I could give you one piece of advice, what we see in all those regression analysis that we've run, internal training is the guide by which to do that. You may not have the resources on hand, but you need to free up the capacity, at least for the resources that do, to spend time on this type of work, to be able to sell it and be able to deliver it. And so that means you need to upskill your team to be able to handle things that maybe those resources are doing that they need to be doing.
Yeah.
They need to be more focused.
I couldn't agree more. And to Danelle's point, there's so much gold in the hills from existing clients as well as new. And we know that new is harder to attribute and get in. But that investment, it's really encouraging to see that in, because this is one of the mantras that we have, get trained, make the most of soft skills as well as technical skills. And that comes back to the ask better questions comment. But one of the frustrations we continue to have, although it is changing, our numbers are up, is those firms that have, a cohort worthy of advisory, getting them trained and actually leaning on your software vendors. I think everyone on this call who's in practice, it doesn't necessarily need to be the deployment of your own resource. Get the Karbon training team in, Ignition, Spotlight, and make sure you're using the software that you have in your tech stack to the best ability that you can. That's at least one part of the solution. Obviously, advisory is also a very human thing, and will always be, because it's art and science. So I think investing in the team and the questions they ask and the interactions they have with customers is a very worthy investment in these uncertain times.
Absolutely. Talking revenue streams too, Ian, as you say, you've almost like you've read the report and you've seen these charts before. How very convenient if we segue to those. what areas are firms looking for free growth? And look, advisory is always a tricky word. People, how they define it and what they call advisory varies from firm to firm, person to person. But when you basically bundle up that anything that's not compliance, that ongoing accounting assistance work is leading the charge alongside the virtual CFO and advisor work. And I think what that really speaks to is the fact that it's not necessarily what we're doing for clients, it's how frequently we're engaging with them. So if you're talking to your clients on a monthly basis, then you're able to have those conversations and identify the opportunities and the challenges, asking better questions because you're across what's actually going on in the business in a timely manner. And that leads to being able to then offer so many more services, whether that be strategic coaching, the forecasting, the tech stack assistance, etc. It leads to that. So it's, long have we heard advisory is human. People actually committing to seeing clients more than once a year, having the conversations, picking up the phone, asking better questions, and having those regular interactions. The rest flows on from that.
One thing to note here is when I read this, if you look at wealth management, 6%, when I look at our results, it's roughly 10% of the total profession does wealth management. But this isn't about the penetration or the usage. This is about the growth. And that's where the market's moving towards. And that's what the clients are demanding. That's where we expect to get more value for ourselves and for our clients. So when you see that something like the ongoing accounting and assistance, that's the bread and butter. We want to be able to mature that, grow that. That's the livelihood. That might be through fees increasing. It might be through new clients coming in. But I was surprised to see at number 2, virtual CFO and advisor work. I mean, that's the hardest of the things that are here. Strategic planning and coaching is another really hard one to do, but that is where we want to see that fee increasing. And so seeing that pop to the top goes to the realization of the importance of that and how we want to have those really, really deep relationships with our clients and have them not only just for a small subset, but broader than that. Because some of the other ones where you talk about cash flow forecasting and tech stack assistance, those are things that come with the conversations on a regular basis. But I was really, really excited to see that those two had risen to the top.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And that was really the fulcrum in which I built my own successful practice was those regular interactions, annual strategic planning, monthly, bi-monthly, quarterly coaching. Obviously using a spotlight report or a forecast is kind of the means to an end. So seeing those track up in each of our reports, even if it's 2 or 3% each time. And as you said, some of this is a stretch. Strategic planning, doing that well. I'm talking. We were doing annual retreats and strategic plans, action plans embedded in spotlights and all that kind of stuff. It's not low-hanging fruit in a way. It's actually quite deep work. And okay, the fact that this is a spotlight carbon ignition tower report, so there's probably a skew towards more progressive firms almost de facto. It's still a really encouraging metric, and it's the high value work. So it speaks to your earlier point, Ian, about the search for profit margin.
There's nothing more deflating than when you have potentially approached a client or you haven't, and then you see the following year that they've gone and spent 30, 40, 50K on a business coach, and you are
Business coaches.
And you are far better positioned with the knowledge that you have and the information that you're privileged to be a part of to actually take that, as you say, Richard, and really go deeper into that work. And it's not necessarily easy. And to your point around training and investment in the team, Ian, the number of times we've talked to firms around role play. And actually, bringing more of the team to your meetings and actually empowering them, role play this out, work through it, use a whiteboard, draw diagrams for your teams are really simplistic tools that firms have, yet it's that investment of time that they don't actually put into it to empower the team to then start being able to take on some of this, higher value work. And that's where you really start to change the needle, and getting those revenue streams up to, 50% plus. Okay, moving
Nice.
along. ESG. one close to your heart, I know, Richard, so that you may not necessarily love the first slice of pizza, if you like, at only 12% who are currently
Uh,
delivering ESG advisory.
it's very understandable. It's still a really emerging space. Obviously, it's sometimes a slightly fraught conversation in North America, perhaps less so in some other regions. But we're certainly seeing this as an area of interest, and ESG being the broad church of non-financial metrics that drive your customers' decision making around obviously carbon, but there's also gender pay, health and safety, governance, community, all of those different impacts and opportunities that SMBs have and that advisors can advise on. So obviously we launched Spotlight Sustain, doing some really interesting things with our AI modeling around that to help advisors give really good industry and region specific ESG advice. So it's an early mover. It's good to see a quarter of firms wanting to delve into this area, but I think it's fair to say few have mastered it yet. The big firms tend to be very good at writing reports and doing audits and things like that around that, but moving it into the SMB space is going to be a work in progress. But again, with accounting firms being that trusted partner, they're walking the corridors of the SMB. This is something that all firms, I think, should at least have on their radar as a possible new service offering.
I think too, we'll definitely see, and we are in conversations absolutely at the moment with firms. There is that supply chain impact that will come through. But I note in your State of AI report too, Ian, the underwhelming lack of investment, I guess, in new service offerings, and that can be, I guess, a testament here too. So actually bringing the team on the journey, being able to use tools like Sustain and talk to clients and give the team time to actually work with what it's going to be is something that firms who are wanting to really innovate in this area are going to need to do.
It's interesting being the person here from the US where there's obviously a little bit of a change of dialogue. The From a carbon standpoint, we actually went carbon neutral. I guess it's in our name, so we should probably be good on that. But we did that in 2021 as a mandate from our
Nice.
staff, actually. And that's been a great benefit for us overall and something that we've been really proud of. I think there's an interesting thing that to really take into account with the ESG advisory. Sometimes when the tide goes one way, you should go the other. I'll give a good example. If you're looking at firms, and we looked at one of the things from the growth metrics that people do, what was the largest piece that actually grew was accounting firms doing cold calls. Now, that to me was pretty shocking. It grew by over 45% since the beginning of the year. A lot of times when something goes one direction, when you go the other, you stand out and you can make a difference here. I think ESG is one of those situations where the corporate supply chains and for instance, in the US and broadly, they haven't changed. The mandates that they have around ESG are being pushed down through their supply chain to their providers. And that emphasis hasn't particularly changed as much because now those particular folks who are in a probably similar position as Richard and I feel obligated more so because of the changing political tides that may, whichever side of the aisle, I don't care. But that also goes back to it's an opportunity for you as an accounting firm to be more astute on that because what happens is as that continues to grow, you have that opportunity, but it will ultimately be a seesaw like it always is.
Yeah.
And so are you prepared for that and are you able to drive that? I don't think things are going to change. But again, opportunity sometimes lies in places you least expect it.
Wise words. And I think when you look back, and I can with my grey hair to when cloud first, became a thing, and there were firms that embraced that, and we moved from a desktop software provider to Xero kind of on day one, or even before day one, it was almost vaporware, because we could see where this was heading. But so many firms kind of stood back and waited and in some ways we're a bit scared of this move and what did it mean for security and could people hack into stuff and all of this. And I think at the moment there are the ones who are nervous on the sidelines, and there are ones, to your point, Ian, who are seeing this as the time to gear up, to educate, to look at options, and start just putting one step in front of the other on this. So that's, it's really exciting. We're dealing with a number of firms who are doing that, a number of providers, and we've got more to kind of announce and share on this soon. But it's not going away. And actually, although there's the supply chain pressure, which is important, there are businesses that actually just want to do this because they feel like it's the right thing to do.
I mean, the best testament is I can name off a whole slew of firms. One of them would be Mad Wealth down in Australia that we just gave an award to at Carbon Next. That her whole business is on essentially ESG advisory, sustainability, and so forth. And again, it provides a very valuable niche. It's increased
Yeah.
profit margins. You have differentiation. Again, driving a very, very effective and efficient business and leading the charge. And that's where you want to be. You want to be able to separate yourself from others. And again, it really goes back to which part of advisory do you want to do that and which part you want to lean into. And this is definitely one area that folks have really found a really good spot to sit.
Absolutely. Speaking of other areas and security to move into, software. Interestingly, with two software providers on the call. So what tech are firms looking to implement or revisit? Because obviously we have somewhat grown up from the early stages of cloud technology hitting the market. And so firms who may have been users are looking at the tech stack as a whole, and is it still serving their purpose? Are there newer entries to the market that are offering better solutions? Are they using their tech stacks to the full capability? And obviously AI front and center there, as people look to grapple with how they can use it, how can they embed it, what can it be used for, what can we do with it, and underlying that, obviously the reporting and forecasting software, practice automation as well. Speaking to both, I guess both yourself, Richard, Ian, again, looking to do more for less for existing clients to retain surprise and delight.
And remind me on this one, it wasn't multi-select, correct?
Correct. Yep, absolutely. Yep.
So we generally ask it with a multi-select. So this, again, for everybody out there reading this goes back to if you chose one, what would it be?
Yeah.
And what really surprised me of this is again, I think AI is not just hype, but again, we are in the sort of journey of its use of vernacular akin to 10 years ago with the word cloud. But what surprised me here with this chart was you've got AI at almost 20%, where I would have expected it to be higher, frankly. And the fact that you've got reporting and forecasting software right on its heels in the second spot just really tells you a testament of when you talked about intent in the first slide, and now you talk about purchasing software on this particular slide, that means there's not only intent, there is pursuant of intent. And that I think goes back to a lot about driving more value with the existing clients. I'm not surprised by the middle section, which is kind of where we're at. We've seen a lot of growth and momentum in there, and automation and efficiency
Yeah.
drives that. But you're looking at profit margin increase, and you're looking at revenues, the services increase, and that's really driven from that second line item.
Mm.
I had to laugh because having built and sold Xero work papers, I need to get back into work papers. Look at that. 11%, that's their number one, which, yeah, kind of sad. AI, yeah, no, you're correct, Ian. I think possibly, and of course this is 2 or 3 months old now, and it's moving so quickly that I think, and we've done a series of videos with Inbal Rodney down in Australia that we're going to be sharing as blog posts in coming weeks. So do check them out, and that's on the state of AI adoption in accounting firms. It's really interesting that even 3 to 6 months ago, there was a lot of very lightweight dabbling, and you can see, ChatGPT, who hasn't played on doing an email or a policy in 2 minutes using ChatGPT. So it was kind of a little bit at that level, but now we're seeing not only the software providers, Karbon, Spotlight, etc., embedding AI where it's consequential, sometimes based on hype and getting to market first, sometimes on actually genuinely looking at what, can improve the experience for the for the customer. But I think accounting firms are now starting to see that there's a broader net here, and with the technology evolving so quickly, there's a lot of fun that could be had, and a lot of efficiency gains to make internally. Um, so you're very close to this, Ian. Just anything you're seeing here, and good to see Karbon mentioned.
Yeah, I feel proud about that. It's interesting to
Yeah.
see, the there's a lot to unpack here. In the AI, it's also a bit of the intent. We see what one of the most astounding stats was 85% of folks that we asked were excited around AI and intrigued. But then we asked how they felt their peers were. They said only 20% of their peers felt the same way. And what that means is there is a disconnect of people expressing and talking about it within the firm. So when I give our talks around the report that we did on the state of of AI and accounting, again, it comes back to training, 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 and the explicit permission to be able to use it. I just came off the road from essentially roundtables across North America, Canada, and the US, and I met firm after firm that has dedicated essential hours for the team to essentially play with their particular generative AI tool of choice and have the ability to spend 10, 15% of their time figuring out ways to be able to automate, be able to create magical things using the tools to try to figure out how to be more efficient. What happens in those scenarios is you get this situation where those who are speeding ahead are going to leave a lot of folks left behind. So if you haven't
Mm.
really thought about how to incorporate this, it's not about figuring out the best way to deliver it or having the perfect answer. You just need to be involved and play in it. You will get a lot of this functionality in your tools themselves. Again, you see some of those emerging there in the box, but you want to start using one of the generic Gen AI engines to really just, plan your vacation with it. Figure out, how to answer a question. I had to write a letter today, and, do it in a secure way. Make sure your data is not shared. But you got to get across this because it is something that's going to change the landscape, like cloud did. But unlike cloud, it will come at us faster, and so that's just the speed of tech.
That's a really huge point, because I think there are a lot of people, as soon as something comes along, there's the hype cycle stuff, of course, but actually there is so much genuine goodness, and there's early stage ripples in the force and all of that as well. But I think that's a really important point. It comes back to investment in people again, as we've talked about throughout this. But giving them the freedom and the time to do that is something we're doing at Spotlight. And even at a tech company like ours, and I'm sure it's the same at Karbon, you have those who are keen in doing stuff anyway, sometimes in the shadows, others who are expressly in an AI guild, which is what we set up, and then others who are still a little bit sitting on the fence. But it's moving so quickly and in really interesting ways that I think as an accounting firm in 2025, you can't afford to be ignorant.
Yeah. I mean, everyone here probably has Slack or Teams or whatever way you work asynchronously in your firm. We set up a channel. We award people once a month. We give out 3 awards, cash value, for who came up with the best. Doesn't have to be the best idea. Who had the best play with AI in order to solve a problem or try to solve a problem, and that's what creates that momentum, that snowball.
I
That's what
like
gets
that.
you to learn. So you need to give that sort of visibility, and you need to make everyone realize that it's there and share it. Again, you may only be in a small firm, so that's where you want to hook up with your peers maybe and share ideas and have something. But you need to be getting down that learning journey personally and with your team.
It reminds me a little bit of the outsourcing too, which we'll come to next. But you'd never mention you'd outsource it to anybody. It was a dirty little secret, and on firms, it's still not spoken about enough around the AI. And it also, did you do that on ChatGPT? Is this not original content or something that you've done your own self? No, it's not. But it took me, a fraction of the time and actually celebrate that fact, and then we can move on. And I think, the 43% we're using it, but it's not embedded, is a testament to that dabbling. Maybe we don't have a paid account. Maybe we're not supposed to be using it. Maybe I am. It's not been spoken about, but it's certainly not been heralded, embraced, and used to innovate. And I guess to how firms are using it, well, we don't know much about it. We don't know what we can be, where we can be using it, where we can be getting the gains. The more time we spend in the tool, the more time we share what problem it's solved or what opportunity it's created. Obviously, as you say, you gain momentum and that snowball effect starts to come from that. So I believe this was sort of similar around that sort of that comms piece, summarizing documents, etc. Proposal client
The low-hanging fruit, isn't it?
came through that your State of the AI report too, Ian?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it was what we saw was the number one was around the communication. Just note that the buckets here kind of add up to what we had before. It's just more granular here,
Yes.
and because so there's more categories. But communication was roughly 63%. Task automation or against automation general was 41%. Meeting transcripts, preparing for advisory was 40%, which had been on that's the largest category of rise. And then, really around all the different things that leverage and create the ability to do forecasting analysis, those things had gone up. They're 13%, so start to get on the board. So the point of this is overall, unlike other industries, we are in a talent shortfall. So no one's getting replaced but what they are getting is upskilled. And where they're getting upskilled is to move to things that provide higher value for those clients. And that's where a lot of this communication, meeting transcripts, task automation activities are allowing for your staff to have that bandwidth to really do things that allow for you to build bigger, better relationships and drive those higher services that you want to do. So again, that's where it provides that advantage. And that advantage is for you to leverage now because your peers are. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, briefly, I am conscious of time. I'm just going to touch on this outsourcing, firms-ish, a 50-50 split. But again, I feel like it's, to the talent shortage and right-sizing firms and being able to align the right skills within the firm, freeing up capacity for those people who want to be advisors, want to be out of the office, actually engaging and talking to clients. When you can actually, get those back office skills without having somebody physically in your office if you need to. And I think that's probably where the industry will look to sit going forward. Richard, any comments you wanted to put on that?
Yeah, I think it's just become part of the business model now. As you said, it used to be something that was kept a bit quiet. Now people realize you can access global teams for different tasks, and AI and automation is going to handle some of the repetitive stuff. Sometimes it's good to push that out to highly trained and often highly skilled, excuse me, teams elsewhere, so that the people in market, they can get physical and face to face with customers doing the high value work.
So if we come to, I guess, the next 12 months, what are firms actually looking at? And it is relatively split at the top of the food chain here. However, I should just point out that in previous surveys, hiring good staff and having work-life balance, good staff, keeping them happy has been a challenge, not unique necessarily just to our industry and for some time. Pricing structures, interestingly, has shot to the top of the order there. And I think that really speaks to, from the outset, looking at those revenue streams, firms wanting to grow their advisory revenues across the board. How do they do that? And what services are they offering? How are they pricing? And again, I referred to the Ignition surveys for both APAC and US focused, and something like 55% of firms are looking at a price increase across the board, across all services in Australia in that survey. It speaks to, there's long been debates about time and cost versus value pricing. Are we on fixed fee engagements? That regular ongoing work, we're talking about wanting to pitch to our existing clients and how do we price that so that they have value when we are an industry that has a notoriously horrendous pricing model that looks at last year, maybe plus 5%, assesses any write-offs of time that we now want to recover, and then is quite happy to wait till the client's happy to pay us. So the ironies are not lost for sure. Having that pricing structures is one of the most challenging areas that firms are facing in the next 12 months. Means we're not immune to the recessionary issues either, and all those other things I just spoke about.
Yeah, I look at this one and there's obviously, and I think you summarized it well. Hiring staff always at the top. Work-life balance always been a problem. Operational workflows, it's been the mantra for the last 7, 10 years. But then you look at generative AI came out of nowhere, so that's a new category.
Mm.
Economic impacts, you would not have seen this in the previous one. So the fact that's in the middle is
No.
pretty big. You got the ones below there. Flexible work arrangements has gone down as we've come out of
Yep.
COVID. Outsourcing was much higher on the list before, so it's gone down. But to see pricing structures move up to the top spot to me was quite surprising.
Mm.
Client engagement interaction, there has been quite a bit of a push over the last several years in terms of trying to get that right and making sure. So if you combine pricing structure, client engagement, and resourcing our advisory strategy, those are all interlinked. And
Yeah.
that is about being able to be there more present with our particular clients that drive the value. So it's
I
interesting.
got I got quite excited by that resourcing our advisory strategy emerging. So we've talked about the absence of strategy still in too many firms. There's a desire but an absence of strategy and commitment. So to see that there was great. Obviously AI is a new offering as well. But yeah, I mean, come on, accounting firms, sort out your pricing. Ron Baker's been talking about this for 3 decades. Read his book. Let's move on, Danelle. We haven't got time to sort out their pricing today.
That brings us to a close. Unless, I mean, if we can talk about back to books and maybe Richard's one, Ian's or Ron Baker's, whoever you like. Ian, did you have anything else in particular you wanted to share around the survey? If anyone does have any questions, feedback for either Richard or Ian, if they want to throw that in the chat now, I can have a quick look around what you're seeing in the market.
Honestly, when I look at the reports and I see things in the profession, I'm looking for data points, 500 or more data points to really make sure that directionally it's correct. And
Mm.
so we're at almost 850 to close to 1,000 on this. Directionally, whether or not you want to argue about a number being up or down, the sensitivity on it's going to be quite tight. And
Mm,
so there's quite a lot in this report that kind of signals where the intention is. The question for everybody here is if that's where the intent is, and we know that the industry is a bit slow, the profession's a bit slow sometimes to get there, but we look at the rate of change that's happening. The questions are, do you sit on your hands or do you take an action? My opinion is you take an action because right now we're in a very interesting time with those who sprint ahead will stay ahead. And that's not a fear piece. We've seen this
no.
time and time again. And so there is a changing world, but I think that's the world of opportunity. It's not a world of fear. And so I think there's a lot to take out of this report to think about, well, how am I gonna get my business ready for the next 5 years of this decade? And what am I going to do through this year to really enable us to get to that, whether it be growth or sustainability, wherever you want it to be, it's in your control to do that.
Mm.
100% Ian. I look back to when I was in practice, my own practice in the noughties, and the opportunity to move faster now with more intent. There's so much evolution happening in our industry, and I think, read the report, read the Karbon report, and just talk to your peers, talk to your team, think about what practice do you want to be, and reach out for it and start making it happen. Move from wish list and intent to action, and that's where the goodness will lie. But yeah, good to chat. We could talk for hours over a beer or a whiskey or something, couldn't we? But we've only got an hour.
Thank you both,
Thanks,
Ian and
Danelle.
Richard, for your time. I very much appreciate it. Thanks to our partners, Karbon, Ignition, and Toa Global for their contributions. Also, for all of those who did register for the webinar, you will be sent a copy of the report. It is available on our website as well, and it also has links to the Karbon Practice Excellence and State of AI report and those Ignition pricing reports as well. So I would encourage you to check it out, create your strategy, be deliberate, and go forth and prosper in the next 12 months. Thanks all.
Thanks, Ian.
Bye, everybody.